Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where you gear demos and reviews as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, please hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today, we're taking a look at the Jam Pedals RetroVibe Mark IV. It doesn't say Mark IV, but this is Mark IV. The Jam Pedals RetroVibe has been kind of a standard of theirs over the years with multiple iterations of this kind of classic Univibe sound. Jam Pedals as a brand has always been really good at giving you exactly what you need in a device and kind of nothing else, which increasingly to me has a lot of appeal. And the RetroVibe Mark IV kind of continues on that lineage with just a kind of like rehousing and a few quality of life updates over the Mark III. You still just have a simple control set, depth, and speed, and a switch for going between a chorus mode and a vibrato mode, basically whether or not your dry signal is kind of running in parallel to the Univibe effect in the device. And on the side you have an expression input, which can be used with a TS cable and a foot switch for external tap tempo, or with a TRS cable and an expression pedal for external speed control. Entirely new to the Mark IV is expanded depth and speed controls, so basically if you've played one of the previous ones, that sound, but wider, and a second foot switch now, which gives you access to tap tempo or press and hold for user definable ramping. Basically, you can set a kind of speed destination and the rate it takes to get there, and then press and hold that foot switch and ramp from the kind of speed you're currently at up to a user determined speed at a user determined rate. Editor Mark from the future here, jumping in for a little bit of clarity on some of the changes to the Mark IV. If you're somebody like me who has kind of combed over the different iterations of the manual, looking for what has been updated and where, something you might notice is that previous iterations of the manual tout the specific components and the optical nature of the RetroVibe, whereas this new one does not. This is a point of clarity I want to make. The previous versions of the RetroVibe use a bulb and photo resistors to operate the same way that classic Univibes do, whereas the Mark IV is no longer using that technology and is instead using an all analog non-optical solution. At the risk of derailing or oversimplifying a little bit, last year in the EU and the UK, the RoHS had an exemption for audio technology expire. This was a carve out in the RoHS that allowed for audio gear to keep using optical components in their gear when it was otherwise banned in all other areas. And that expired last year, which is why you saw a bunch of brands have to discontinue a bunch of their analog and some digital gear that was being sold in the EU and the UK. Because Jam Pedals was using an optical circuit in the RetroVibe Mark IV, they've had to update it to kind of fit into compliance with the new laws in the EU and the UK. That is why we are now looking at this new non-optical version of a Univibe. But with that change, Jam Pedals has kind of managed to retain that, what's a word for vibe that isn't vibe because that feels like a pun, and has also been able to give it expanded control, having moved away from that kind of original format. Anyways, back to the video. And as always with Jam Pedals, this is a very retro looking pedal because it is also a very retro sounding pedal. For something with chorus and vibrato settings on it, it does not harken back to the 80s, but rather, as you can tell by the art on this thing, much closer to something from the 60s. And not only is that true in the fact that it is a Univibe and in that it looks very retro in that way, but also even if you take depth and speed to minimum in this, when you activate the pedal, you're going to hear a tonal shift towards warmth, a smoothing of high end, a kind of focusing of your tone in ways that feel like it very much transports you back in time. And we will cover some of those sounds in the sound samples because that kind of tonal shift might not be what you're looking for in all situations. But if you are looking for something that does classic Univibe sounds and really commits to the bit, as it were, the RetroVibe Mark IV might very much be for you. So let's go ahead and plug this thing into my Benson and give it a listen. So as always, before we get into our sound samples, let's talk through our signal chain and the context we're working in. I am playing my Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster with Lambertone's Ristretto pickups. We are playing directly into the Jam Pedals RetroVibe Mark IV, and then into our amplifier, which is my Benson Monarch Plus, loaded up with an Alnico Gold and mic'd with a Soyuz V1. This is what our dry tone sounds like. So we're going to start things off by taking a look at chorus mode. We will then move over to vibrato, and then once we've kind of gotten through our sound samples on both of those, we will circle back around and take a look at that tap tempo, the ramping controls, and that expression input. As always, chapter markers down below if you want to jump to a specific sound or feature. It's really interesting to hear how this circuit kind of imbues a lot of warmth into your tone. It kind of soothes some of the sparkle in the top end. And rather than giving you kind of a very classic 80s chorus, it gives you a really kind of warm, vintagey vibe that kind of harkens further back than that, which is kind of nice. Even with rate and depth at the bottom, as you just heard, you end up with two very distinct, different tonal bedrocks on chorus and vibrato. So while we're in that vibrato mode, let's go ahead and take a look at that right foot switch. It is going to be used for tap tempo and for ramping. Tap tempo is pretty straightforward. You tap in a tempo and it sets the speed of the pedal to that tempo. And to control ramping on this pedal, just press and hold that right foot switch. In order to set up your parameters for ramping, what you want to do is press and hold that right foot switch, set speed to the kind of desired end point of the ramp, and then once releasing, set the speed control back to your kind of starting position. From there, just play and then press and hold to ramp up to the new position. Tapping the foot switch returns you back to the original. Important to note that you don't have to ramp up. You can also ramp down to a second position. You can also control the rate at which you go from the original speed to the ramped speed by repeating that same process but with the depth foot switch. Press and hold the right foot switch, set depth to the speed you want to ramp at, counterclockwise being slower, clockwise being faster. And then once you release that foot switch, set your depth back to your kind of desired parameter. The expression port on the right side can also be used for tap tempo or speed ramping as well. If you use a TS cable to a passive tap switch or potentially a MIDI controller that can send tap out, like an analog tap out, not MIDI clock out, obviously for this device, you can receive external tap for the RetroVibe Mark IV. Alternatively, you can control the speed using an expression pedal over TRS by plugging a TRS cable into that expression port on the side. We're going to go ahead and use our Dunlop Volume X Mini. let's go ahead and crank up the reverb on our Benson and really kind of create something very sound designy and vibey with that.